And today I have none other than one of my favorite clients. And you may know her from being the VP of Global Supplier Diversity over at the Coca-Cola Company. Therese Thompson, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome, Courtney. Glad to be here.
So today we are going to be talking about something that a lot of people, it's made a lot of news. People are trying to get their plans together for 2021. And it's really all around the future of supplier diversity. Supplier diversity has really gotten its shine this year. And as people are thinking through their supplier diversity strategy for next year, I really want to highlight some of the things that they can expect. But before we get into that, I want you to share, because a lot of people don't know, you haven't been in supplier diversity your whole career. So can you walk us through how you pivoted to supplier diversity and why it's been the final mark in your career at the Coca-Cola Company?
Yeah, I tell this story a lot, and people get, I think they find it funny. So my background is finance. I'm a recovering CPA, as I tell folks. I've been at Coke for 35 years, and I actually started at Price Waterhouse, which is Price Waterhouse Coopers now. So I was a very traditional accounting finance person. I graduated from Morgan State University and HBCU in 1981, and pretty much was on a track to be in public accounting, which I loved. I didn't necessarily consider becoming a partner, but I stayed there for a while until Coke recruited me. And so I was recruited at the time. You know, we kind of go through cycles where Coke was really focused on diversifying its workforce like it always has been. And I was hired out of Price Waterhouse as a kind of high potential person who could go into leadership in finance. And so I was on that track. And I always tell people I was very blessed that I was good with numbers. I enjoyed finance and accounting, but it wasn't something that just kind of moved my soul, so to speak. But it's a great place to start in business. So I was doing very well in finance, had gotten some really responsible roles, but realized that I really wanted to do something different. And I got the opportunity to work in the Africa business, which was just a dream come true. I traveled all around Africa for 10 years, worked with just one of the most wonderful leaders you could ever work with. His name is Carl Ware. We re-entered the company into South Africa, and it was just a dream come true. And so at that point, I realized, okay, I have this operational experience in my background. I can run a business. Of course I can run a business. I'm good. I was a fast tracker. And so I was making progress. And just to be quite frank with you, and it's not to be a Debbie Downer, I hit the glass ceiling. I had done a lot of major work, had gotten a lot of, good, attaboys on the back, but just could not go to that point. And as with many companies, Coke was going through a reorg. They wanted me to run another project. And I said, no, I want to own a business. And they said, well, that's not available right now. And, we want you to stay, and, we want you to run this project. And I got sort of belligerent. And then so we were sort of at an impasse. And of course, I was angry, like a lot of people are. And they came to me and said, we have an opportunity that we think you'll really enjoy. It'll allow you to be in the business and also be focused on diversity. Well, I looked at them and said, well, what made you think I want to be focused on diversity? That's not real business. I do diversity because I'm a Black woman, but I can't do it the way I want to under the confines of the diversity bucket. But the CPO at the time, he convinced me that it was the right place to go for someone like me who knew so much about the business, had so much credibility, and had a passion for diversity. And he had promised me that he would allow me to be my authentic self. So I did accept it because I needed a job. And it really has been one of those things where the stars aligned in the right way, even though it wasn't what I thought I wanted. And what I say to that is that, through a career, you're going to always get to those points where it's not exactly what you think you want or what your brand is calling for. But be very intentional, be in the moment, and realize that this is happening in your life for a reason. and make the most out of it. And so I would say that I don't pivoting in me means sort of a kind of you're kind of pivoting, so there's a flexibility. There's a little bit of resistance on my part, so I kind of got parked in diversity, and then I kind of hit the ground running and came out, 100 miles an hour. So that's my story. And I've told it in different ways, but I think you get the point.
I love it. I love it. So you hit the ground running and you took charge like you do very well. And how did it change? What were some of the first steps that you took in order to make it your own?
Well, so, people in business, and I was one of those, just by what I said, really look at diversity sometimes not in the way it really is. And so I knew that there was an imperative for me to push this along, integrated in the business. But I actually thought that I knew more than everybody around me who had been doing diversity for years. And so what I quickly found is that there was some real benefit in understanding the discipline of diversity and supplier diversity. And there is some truth that it's not always focused on in a disciplined way. So I did spend a lot of time really targeting those folks that I saw as being the best at it. And a couple of people that come to mind were people that were right on my team: Yvonne Austin, Valerie Nesbitt. Then you have Michael Robinson from IBM, Teresa Harrison from Ernst & Young. And I really did shadow and just, really drunk up everything that I could from them, and looked to them as role models. But then on the other hand, I also said I do have some unique characteristics to bring. And those were really about, I think I kind of grew up fearless. I don't know if it was because I had a mom who was fearless raising me on her own. I don't know if it's because I was at HBCU and I was embraced and told how wonderful I was from day one. But I've never really been in corporate America. My experience in corporate America, I've never really been that tentative. And so I do know that I had a lot to bring from a business perspective, and not ROI in the way that we always talk about it, but I really felt like there were a lot of key constituents inside the supplier diversity space that weren't really driving the business imperative and really weren't focused in the way that I thought they should be around identifying the right suppliers and really pushing back on the business to fully integrate diverse suppliers in their supply chain and really understanding kind of the value that diverse suppliers bring. And then also on the other hand, really focusing on those diverse suppliers who I saw had a lot of potential, who I knew would be delivering quality services, and really kind of planning and sharing for the long term. So I would say that my focus, probably not from the very beginning, but as I quickly got into it, is to really find that nexus between diversity and inclusion and operations, and how you impact the business and the diverse suppliers you're working with in a different way. And I also thought, because my background was a little bit different, that I might be able to change the space a little bit. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really tried to not only be on the board of the NMSDC or work with WeBank, but really try to push and influence them in a way that we could revolutionize the way we do supplier diversity.
I love that. So one thing that you just said was your diverse perspective was one of the key benefits and the key drivers of the success that you've had in the Coca-Cola supplier diversity space. So would you say that that's one of the things also that these diverse suppliers are bringing to the space? What are some of the things that you see diverse suppliers being good at in terms of what they add to a company?
Yeah, so here's my perspective. We're in a very different time. I mean, things have changed in the last 5 years to 10 years quicker than they did in the previous 100 years before that. So what I really do think that diverse suppliers bring to the space and can bring to the space is that, we say this all the time when we talk about supply diversity. Innovation is where, diverse suppliers can really help you, but it really is true. In a digital age, I think the playing field is really leveled. And there are some spaces like digital, social, even manufacturing, because manufacturing is really being enabled like by technology. And because of the space that we're in, I really do think that diverse suppliers with the right skill sets and the right capacity can really compete as effectively against larger, more established players because where we are as an economy. I mean, there are going to be some places where brick and mortar, hundreds of millions of dollars are going to weigh in heavier. But most of those spaces are, unless they're like aerospace or something like that, many of those big spaces have been commoditized. So there's not as much value for a supplier or a business and getting into those spaces as it is in those spaces that are governed by AI, digitization, research, and things like that. So I do think that there are diverse suppliers who are in some of these heavy industrial spaces that will have an advantage. But I think because we're in such a fast moving age and digitization, AI, etc., and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to come up with an app. That's not really what I'm talking about. It's kind of like what I hinted at before. What technology is out there that can really enable your manufacturing processes to be quicker, more efficient, more nimble? What's the next thing that's on the horizon that will help you that will help you help a customer appeal to this new, diverse, ever-changing consumer base? So I do think that, there is a lot of opportunity to be competitive, but then grow faster and scale up faster so that you do have the benefit of size and scale on your side as well as new thinking.
I love that. And then so we talked about diverse suppliers, but let's talk a little bit about supplier diversity from the supplier diversity professional standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the supplier diversity profession changing as everything becomes more agile, as technology becomes a component of that? What do you see the trends being, and what should supplier diversity professionals be thinking about as they're preparing for 2021, and even emerging supplier diversity professionals who are planning for a career in it?
Yeah, I think that I think corporations are starting to see that supplier diversity professionals should be plucked out of many of their more foundational areas. So I'm finding a lot of my supplier diversity peers have procurement backgrounds. They have finance backgrounds. I mean, some of them do come out of some of the what I would call softer skills, and that's not a bad thing at all. But I do think that you have to go in there with the knowledge that much of what you are doing not only depends on your ability to manage external relationships, but it also relies on your ability to analyze numbers, to understand trends, to be able to have tough conversations with the business leaders that are the decision makers. I say to people all the time, as a supply diversity professional or any diversity professional, you really are in an interesting seat because you're being asked to go in and challenge many times the status quo, challenge incumbent relationships, challenge biases that people have, not because they're bad people. It's environmental. We all have our biases. But not only do you have to challenge them to make decisions around those things that I mentioned, but you've got to be invited back. Because business cycles continue, and you're not, just because you get a supplier in 2020, depending on what that service or product is, you probably have to go back and advocate for them in 2021 as well. So I would say that's very important. And I also say, be an influencer in the space, help define the space. I say this all the time. We're in an industry that has not changed that much in the 40 or 50 years that it's existed. Now, what you could say is that we've got some great staying power. We've built a lot of equity, and I would agree with that. But you also have to understand that in most business cases, if you're using the same model, and I've told you this before, Courtney, you're called a dinosaur, and that's not a compliment. Um, you're almost kind of like, you're almost kind of like not practicing what you preach. Because one of the things that we have to preach as supply diversity professionals to our colleagues is incumbency shouldn't be the dictator of why you select someone, especially if the person isn't being innovative. And so if we are pretty much kind of staying status quo, we kind of are that incumbent that's not really changing, that's blocking the way for some of our diverse suppliers. Having said that, I don't say that as much as I used to, because I am very impressed with the leaders that I see out there in the various groups. I mean, Justin Nelson, I think he's a visionary. Adrian Trimble has done so much to move the needle with NMSDC. And then my friend Pamela Eason, who runs WeBank, we all know, how customer focused she is, how innovative she is. And so I do see a lot of promise. And if I haven't named your organization, it's not because I don't respect and love you. It's just because I'm at the age where I forget things. But I do see a lot of positive change in the space. My peers, as I said, are really some of the best and brightest in their, not only in the supply diversity field, but in their business and other disciplines as well. So I'm very hopeful, but I do think we've got to accelerate that pace of change. And I do think we've got, another thing too, I'll say, is I think we've got to look at MBEs a little bit different. And hopefully if they're MBEs, you don't get offended. I remember I was sitting in some leadership meeting. I don't know if we were benchmarking or practicing, and we were kind of talking about the three-legged stool that's supply diversity: the corporations, the supply diversity professionals, and the business enterprises. And so, obviously corporations have a key role to play. But someone said, well, the business enterprises are our products. I was like, huh? I just didn't even get that. But then when I thought about it, if you look at the corporation solely as your customers, then your goal is to bring them a strong pipeline of diverse suppliers. So I think to that perspective, it's true. But I also think because the industry has been around so long, there are some very significant business enterprises that have a lot more weight than a corporate supplier diversity person, can write a much bigger check, and can influence their peers and some of the corporate folks because of their expertise. And so I think we've got to evolve our thinking on what the role is of the business enterprise, the diverse business enterprise, in ensuring the success of the space. Because I would say they have as strong a role in some cases as corporates. And, and a lot of the diverse businesses, I know that the leaders of the WeBanks and the NMSDs feel like I push them, but I also push some of the large business enterprises because I feel like they've benefited from the space. They are very wealthy, and there is a reason for them to invest in the space for themselves and their growth because they benefited from it, but also for business enterprises that are fairly new in the space or they're having some issues and weaknesses. And I would say that's probably going to be even more important coming out of COVID-19.
So you said a couple things in there that I want to piggyback on. So one thing is you mentioned the importance of diverse suppliers also having essentially their own supplier diversity programs and being advocates for their own diverse suppliers, right?
Well, I would take it a little further than that. Definitely that. And that really is something like, if you know Corporate Plus, that's something required. But it's also being an advocate. I've got someone outside. I think y'all can hear. I'm sorry about that. No. But it's also about being an advocate for the supplier diversity industry.
Gotcha.
It's also about playing a significant role in the space, not just relying on corporate members and affiliate organizations, and then just looking for what opportunities you can get from those folks. Now, in some cases with smaller MBEs, that's pretty much what they can do, and that's pretty much what they can sustain. But I do think there are some very large, successful, diverse business enterprises that can play as strong a role, in addition to using, because I do think B2B is important. I do think supporting and developing diverse suppliers is important, but that can only take you so far. I'm talking about how you build the foundation of sustainability, and that really requires investment above and beyond the use. I'm sorry, guys. The use of diverse supply. So yes, that's a part of it, but it's also being one of the three-legged stools in the space that's helping to drive supplier diversity along. To your earlier question.
I love that. I love that. And then let's talk a little bit about COVID-19. It clearly disrupted a lot of businesses. Over 40% of Black-owned businesses specifically have shut down as a result of COVID-19. So can you talk specifically around the opportunities that have emerged for diverse suppliers with COVID-19? Because while there have been some heartbreaking losses of businesses that people have been had around for years, there also have been many opportunities that have emerged from it. So can you talk a little bit about the unique opportunity presented?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. One, because of the agility and the ability to respond, many diverse suppliers have been in a position to continue their operations in a significant way. I think one of the things that has been really a blessing for many of us corporations who use diverse suppliers is many diverse suppliers have pivoted and focused on providing goods and services specific to COVID-19. In some cases, they are adjacent and integral to the businesses they have. And in some cases, they're completely different. And so that has been a very positive story in this COVID-19 story. But one of the things that I will say, and it does concern me, is that I do think eventually, I think COVID-19 is here with us for a while, and there's going to be a need for PPE and sanitizing and that sort of thing like that. But it is going to become a commodity because we kind of know what it is. It's going to have a cycle that you have to follow. And what I would say to those businesses is, hooray, thank you for saving us, but ensure that you are starting to think about the business strategy around that. Is it a service that you want to continue and maintain? And if it is the profitability here? If it was something that you did in the interim, have you continued to nurture the business that you have had? And if not, what does that mean? So I think that we teach fundamental business things. And I would say, so in one way, it's been very good, but it is a little bit of a concern for me in terms of how folks will either adjust back to their business, maintain what they pivoted to, or do both. I mean, which could be beneficial. And that has concerned me a little bit. There's no data right now on what that means. I do know it's almost sort of like similar to prior to COVID, there seemed to be an abundance of IT staffing firms.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, but now it feels like I'm getting like tons of emails from folks who have pivoted to PPE. As a matter of fact, it's so funny that we're talking about this. Paul Cooper, who works on my team, he kind of manages that for us. And so I had met a supplier, and she was a representative of a company who provides PPE. And, she was, of course, it was something unique and different about their PPE. So I sent it to Paul, and then I get this message from them saying, well, did you get our delivery? And I was like, well, did I ask for your delivery? Did Paul ask for your delivery? And it wasn't a bad thing, but, it just goes to show you that this is one of those places that may be becoming saturated. And again, like I said, I think COVID is here for a while, but I don't think it's going to be forever, because if it is, we've got different issues we've got to deal with. And I do think that those products, unless there's something very unique, patented about them, will become sort of a commodity, which means the pricing will be depressed at some point.
Right. You said something in there about, getting the delivery. Is there a certain level of tenacity or grit that you see, not necessarily in that specific company, but that's necessary in that kind of like initiative that I'm going to send it, and, if they get it, oh, well, if they don't, but I'm going to take that extra step. Do you see that being necessary?
Well, I think you've got to know your supplier diversity professional. People who know me, I think, know that I'm like open for all ideas. I don't mind people calling me. I try to respond back to them. I love the aggressive nature, because I'm aggressive too. So I will tell them, well, that's great, but, or if they really are good, I'll be their biggest advocate across the system. I'll send them to the CEO if I think they can really benefit. But not every supplier diversity person is like that. I do think that is a necessary skill to be an entrepreneur. I really do. I'm not an entrepreneur. Don't want to be one, but admire entrepreneurs. So I do think being aggressive, being confident, having a hustle mentality is very important. Having said that, if you are looking for supplier diversity to be your entree into corporate America, you have to know the culture of that, because some supplier diversity people, not only are they not going to be answering all your emails, if they tell you to send it to their database, send it to their database. Don't be calling them, be calling their CEO. Don't call their procurement people. I mean, I'm just saying. For me, I'm good with it. Just don't surprise me. I mean, if you know somebody at Coke, if you know the CEO, and and you can send them something, but just let me know. Don't, that's my thing. So it just really depends. I'm probably at the extreme of engagement, and there's some supplier diversity people is like, come to my booth, meet my buyers, tell me what you do, put it in our database. If you don't hear from me, don't call me. You just got to know. You just have to know. That would be my perspective.
Gotcha. So basically, pay attention to what they say and follow it. Don't
exactly.
Don't try to be creative, because you can rub people the wrong way.
And you got to remember, most of us are corporate people. We're doing a job 9 to 5. I probably would have been like that if I started my career in supplier diversity. But as I said, I didn't. I really am fearless. I admire fearlessness. I love young people. I love slapping them down if they get too crazy. And if they can't handle it, I know they probably can't be. So it just depends. You're laughing because I'm telling the truth, right?
Oh goodness! I know. Oh, I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up, I want to pivot a little bit. We've been working together. We actually met at WeBank, and you mentioned WeBank. We met at WeBank Florida, which was probably 4 years ago. And then again at NMSDC, and then again at WeBank, and and have been working together since. So can you talk specifically around what we've been able to accomplish in our almost 2 years working together, and what made you, because there were a lot of diverse suppliers that you could have selected, right? But you chose to work with me and my company. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, I'm like everybody else. I do have to have a connection with a person, and really, that's really about authenticity, genuineness, and smarts, in my opinion. Yeah. So that was the first thing. And the business doesn't have to be perfectly aligned, but I have to know that there is a potential. So if I take your card and I call you, it doesn't mean that there's work right away, but there does. And I also, so that was the connection I had with you at the time. And to be honest with you, because communication is one of those relationship based, I really did not know if we would have an opportunity at the Coca-Cola company, but I did know you had potential. I have a focus on women of color, as you know. And so I took your information as much as because I thought we could potentially use you. I shared it with Yvonne Austin, who is my director, because she does our indirect. And then I also wanted to have you for potential referrals to other people. Do you want me to talk a little bit about the work we did?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
And so the other thing too is that at the time that I met, I didn't realize that we were going to have a need in supplier diversity. But going back to your original questions, one thing that I've always thought storytelling was important. But one of the things that I realized is that if you don't engage both internally, externally in a very proactive way, you're not going to be able to be the evangelical sort of part that you need in supply diversity, unless at that time your CEO and all your key executives are aligned in selling the story. So Coke has always been very supportive of supply diversity, but because of all the changes that we've had, we haven't had as much attention to the work as we would like to internally. And so again, budgets were an issue. So probably, I think you came in last year or this year. Yeah. We would have loved to have done it differently. And we weren't getting sort of the engagement with our public affairs team that we wanted. So we bit the bullet and made a decision. And we knew as a supply diversity space that we needed to use a diverse supplier. And it's not about you so much, Courtney, but one of the things that we do when we bring new diverse suppliers in, it's not only an opportunity for us to engage them in the business, but we see every opportunity as a developmental opportunity. And so one of the things that we've spent a lot of time in with all the new diverse suppliers that we're onboarding, and I think you could agree with that, is really not only bringing them in to do the business, but also helping them grow and develop for future business to come. And so I would say that we brought you in for the typical reasons. You showed promise, you understood our business, and you had the skills we needed for the communication plan. I do think, like with a lot of suppliers, we felt like it was a developmental opportunity. I do probably more than my team does. And so for me, I push very hard on diverse suppliers because I do believe, and it's not just African American or people of color, I do believe, fair or unfair, and I think suppliers have to get used to this, is that because, again, of bias, not because people are hateful, that generally, not always, when you're bringing a diverse supplier in, the expectations are skewed. So I'm always pushing my diverse suppliers to be twice as good or twice on their delivery. And a lot of people push back and say, well, is that fair? But my thing is, life's not fair. And if life was fair, I wouldn't have a job. We wouldn't need a supply diversity function. And so if you don't like it, don't work with supply diversity, work through the normal channels. And so I think we've had a lot of success with the work that we've done with you. I think you've actually grown into an area different than what we may have started out to be. But when you work for the Coca-Cola company as a diverse supplier, and we're directly involved, always expect to be, I don't want to say challenged. Well, I would say challenged because there's a lot on the line in terms of the pipeline that you're bringing in, and in terms of other suppliers that are coming in after you. And so we always try to use a diverse supplier in our supply diversity team. Having said that, there's times when we haven't, because when we've gone through the competitive process, we found another supplier who probably met the needs that we have. But we do think it's important for us to practice what we preach in terms of advocating for diverse suppliers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that does. Okay. That does. And then I have one final question for you. So as people are planning out, you have people who are interested in doing work with large corporations like the Coca-Cola company. And then you also have people who are supplier diversity professionals who want to engage with more of those diverse suppliers who want to work with organizations like theirs. What do you think the best practices are for, and I would say like maybe your 3 tips or your 3 takeaways for how those two how they can both win and how they can work together?
Yeah, I do think that it's important to engage in the official supplier diversity space. So I think that large corporations like ours should not only be national members of those organizations, obviously depending on budget, but also it should engage locally where appropriate. I also think it's very important for diverse suppliers to certify. If now, I have gotten pushback. Well, they don't do anything for me, but that goes back to my other point. You know, any product that you buy, or any service that you're getting, you've got a role to play in ensuring that you get something back. I would say you're probably talking to me because because you have engaged in the space. I would also say in most cases, the investment in those organizations is fairly small relative to the benefit that you can get. And if you can't make an investment like that, more than likely, you're probably not best suited to work with a company like Coca-Cola. Having said that, I do respect that people have to make business decisions based on themselves, but I do think that's an important part. So that's the first thing. And then I would say, like anything else, you really need to understand the businesses that you're targeting. I mean, I know I have these really cute costume jewelry earrings on, but don't come to Coca-Cola trying to sell costume jewelry. I mean, believe it or not, people do come. Now we do have premiums that we use in different things, but if you're coming really thinking you can get a big contract with us, you probably don't understand the business. And then, like you said, Courtney, I think the other thing on both sides, both on the supplier diversity professional side and the corporation side, listen to what people are telling you, follow that advice closely. And then I would also say for corporations, and I think most corporations do a very good job at this, is we spent some time about 5 or 6 years ago really prioritizing around those spaces that we were going to focus on and really coming up with dialogues and conversation pieces that respected the diverse suppliers, but really laser focused on what we want and whether they would apply. But I do think, and I think actually now in this virtual age, you probably have a lot more opportunity as a diverse supplier to engage with corporations. I think it's like anything else though, you got to be mindful about it. You've got to plan it, because I don't know about you all. Working virtually has me like it's like a circular thing. I really miss a lot more than I would have. And so the better prepared folks that I'm working with are and dealing with me, and then vice versa, the more you get done. But I think if you're really strategic, it's almost like it's you don't really have to have a great personality. You don't have to have a huge travel budget. You don't even have to be, I mean, I've got jeans on with this cute shirt and this jewelry. So you don't really have to, you can really just invest in what's important.
Yes.
Versus the extra stuff that unfortunately make a big difference when you're like going to trade shows, when you're, like it's so impressive if you're an MBE that can buy, a corporation call. So we want you to come for a capability session. If you can get on a plane, even if you can do that, it's probably not the best use of your money.
Right.
So use this technology, build your profile and your skills based on the fact that everything is virtual. And you are really in a better position, I think, to compete than you would have been before. And this isn't going to go away, because even say if COVID is gone by Q2, corporations are starting to look at their travel budget a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And so being prepared, like for example, Yvonne, again, speaking of her, she's like so buttoned up. And I think, Courtney, maybe you were involved in this. So there was like some kind of video we were supposed to do.
Oh yeah.
She had already bought herself a green screen. I had none of that. And so now I bought my green screen and I've got my microphone and all that kind of stuff like that. But and with Amazon and other, digital platforms, I mean, a lot of the folks out there, you can go online and get pretty much what you want at a pretty reasonable price. Because again, if you can't do those things, you probably truly aren't in a position to work with a Coca-Cola company, unless you just have something that's once in a lifetime, one of a kind, you're curing some kind of, illness that nobody else is, you patented it something. But if you can't get yourself a nice computer, a microphone, a green screen, have a good elevator pitch, maybe have some samples if they want it, don't just send it to them. You probably can't really do business with companies like that. I'm not saying you can't, but 99.999% of the time you probably can if you can't do those things.
I love it. I love it. And then I have to piggyback on one more thing you said, is build your profile, which I love. I think that's so important. And one thing that I always say, you have to make sure that you have a presence, because the visible business is the one that wins. So
yes, and you got to really know it like the back of your hand. You really can't slip up. If you get on camera and someone says, "What are you doing? What do you do for me?" You don't have as much time either, because this virtual stuff, the most that I want to be on screen, we've probably gone too long here, Courtney, it's probably like 30 minutes. And if I'm doing a matchmaking, you need to be able to tell me what I need to know in like 15 minutes. And then if I extend the time, you've done your job. But you should really be able to tell me the gist of what I need to know. Like I said, 10 minutes. And then know you're doing something if I stay on longer.
Well, I guess that's a good sign then, because I've had you for 11 minutes over our scheduled time. So I appreciate that, Taryn. All right, well, that actually wraps up everything I wanted to talk about with you today. We got some questions in from some people, and I think that I did them good by answering those questions or asking those questions to you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Not a problem.
This has been very enlightening for a lot of listeners. So thank you again, Therese.
Okay, you take care, Courtney. It's good to see you. Bye-bye.